This particular one was made in 1933 as it's stamped. Let's see if I can get the sun, 1933. And it's got import markings stenciled on there. But it's a double single action rifle, so meaning you can pull the trigger and it'll run the hammer, or you can just pull the hammer back and it'll run in single action. It's a breech, well, I guess you would call it a breech loading. It's a side loading revolver, just like the old Colt single action, and the loading gate is very stiff. But you just pull it off, the lever off to the side like that, and the cylinder will free rotate. Load them in one by one, and then you just close up that loading gate. And there it is, just like that. Now she's ready to fire. So the 1895 has seen a lot of service life. I think that it's still in service today in some parts of the world, particularly Afghanistan. You'll see some of these popping up here and there. They get a mishmash of old Russian guns that they picked up when the Soviets came through. But right about the time that this particular one was manufactured in '33, it was being replaced by the Tokarev to the semi-auto. And that was later replaced by the Makarov, but these still stuck around. So meanwhile, the standard issue Army pistols that they changed up, this stuck around for guards or civilian use or even police. They're already made, they're cheap, super durable. You could just literally throw this thing in the mud right now and it'll still shoot with no problems. Very peculiar gun, to say the least. It's got fixed sights on it, like you see in a lot of the older ones, so just a notch rear sight. And it does have a dovetail drift front sight, so if you have any problems with your windage, you can always drift that back and forth. So the Nagant does have some very unique features about it. If you look right down there, you start to think, anybody who knows a revolver thinks that's terrible. But watch this. Closes it right up. So the reason anybody would think that's terrible if you don't know much about revolvers, there's something that's always going to be in there. It's called a cylinder gap, where typically the bullet has to jump that very tiny gap. In this case, it's a very large gap to get down the bore. Now what the Russians ended up doing is they set it so as you cock the hammer, the cylinder comes forward and creates a gas seal. So believe it or not, there are models of this that are threaded on the barrel where you can suppress them. If you look on the hammer here, it's got a very long tooth. I would imagine that breaks fairly often. I haven't had that problem yet, and hopefully I don't. But that's something to keep notice of. And then the loading system. When it comes down to loading this, it's a lot of people are going to find this very similar to the old Colts, the side loaders. You just pop the loading gate down just like that. The cylinder is going to free rotate. You just put the shell in, move it on to the next chamber, and you keep on going. When you're finished up, just close the loading gate just like that. Now when it comes down to unloading it, it's the same way that you'll see on a lot of the old single actions. Open up that loading gate, cylinder is going to free rotate over. Now here's where it gets kind of weird. Okay, this is made, these were started production in the model of 1895, but here we are, this is 1933. Well, with this one, you got to take this pin right here, rotate it, pull it out, rotate it to the side like that, and then manually punch it, each one of the shells out, just like that. And it's not spring loaded at all. It's just free running like that, which is kind of weird because the old 1873 Colt single action Army, built 20 years before this was even thought of, they were spring loaded. But this is just a free float, just like that. You just punch it out, just like that. Sometimes it works, sometimes you miss it, and then you got to pull it out with your nail, not a big deal. Then you bring it forward, rotate it back into position under the barrel, bring it back down, and done. So you could draw a lot of comparisons of the 1895 Nagant to the old Colt single action, right? This is not a Colt single action Army, this is just a 22 knockoff. But the loading system is basically the same. With the single actions, you got to put them on half cock. You open up the loading gate, and now the cylinder is going to freely rotate. You have to put it on the half cock for the single actions, not the Nagant. The Nagant free floats anyway. You load your cartridges in, like so. Close the loading gate. And then that's ready to fire. But remember, these are single actions, the Nagant's a double single. And while we're making the comparison, and here's the unloading for the Colt single action. Rotate it over, then you go to the spring-loaded ejector rod that the Nagant does not have, and punch it out, rotate, punch it out, and then the spring will reciprocate back in place, so you don't have to manually replace it. Just weird little things like that that you wonder, why did Colt put all that together back in 1873, but in 1895 the Russians didn't? Who knows? It's probably cost efficiency. Most likely cost efficiency. You're saving on parts and engineering and all that, but it's just weird anyway. And if it wasn't weird enough, check out the rounds. The 7.62 Nagants. You got a regular old brass case, but then you got a recessed bullet in there with a beveled on the top there. Well, why the hell would the Russians do this? Well, it goes along with the gas seal system. So when the cylinder pushes forward, it pushes the cartridge forward too, and that little lip seals in the chamber, so it makes a very nice tight gas seal in there. So you have the cylinder forward, and then you have, if I stop dropping it, then you have the cartridge itself sealing in the board in the chamber as well. So as far as gas efficiency goes, it's excellent. It's revolutionary. And so just to compare it, I'm going to set it next to this 22 long rifle, but it's obvious. So you got the fully sleeved bullet of the 7.62 Nagant, and then the 22 long rifle, just like any other cartridge out there, it's got the exposed bullet that's seated inside the case. But they both have two different purposes for that. Well, that's all fine and good for some quick detail on it, but let's get to the meat and potatoes and load this thing up. It's kind of nice, they hold 7 shots as opposed to a regular old 6 gun. Let's see how she does. We'll do double action first. It's a very, very heavy trigger.